Welcome back to the Mormon News Roundup. I am your humble host, D-Base. That's talent on loan from Kolob. Today is December 29th, 2024. We're going to go over the top 10 LDS news stories for the entire year. It was a wild ride in 2024, and we're going to bring it all to you. I'm a tiny bit under the weather here, so hopefully I'll be able to push my way through this. And the embarrassing thing is, I already recorded this entire episode, which was 90 minutes long yesterday, but the audio all got chopped out. I've got a couple of little things that I need to hit. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. And I finally figured out how to get this thing live on the interwebs, both on Facebook and on Instagram. You can find the full episodes live and join us in the live chats at that time. I think I've got everything ready to go here. Let's check out our slide deck here. The top 10 news stories of 2024. I'm going to kick it off from number 10 all the way to number 1. So number 10, the church is involved with building a number of temples, and they announced 35 temples, I believe, in 2024. And the one that caused the most amount of controversy was the Fairview, Texas temple. It was originally called the Prosper Temple. Then it was renamed to the Fairview Temple, the McKinney Temple, and it finally landed on the Fairview Temple. Had a lot of controversy because it was supposed to be a very large temple in a residential area in which there was a low concentration of Latter-day Saints. There was a number of protests that were associated with this temple, including before the town council. Here we hear Texas Mayor Lesnar, who has strong words for Mormon church leaders, and they were not at all happy about this particular temple.
The mayor of Fairview, Texas, Henry Lesnar, had some strong words last night for the leaders and lawyers of the Mormon Church.
Your attorneys from Salt Lake City are very smooth, calmly starting our conversation with the fact that they've dealt with municipalities many times. If y'all remember calmly that starting our conversation, and essentially have forced these communities to take an unwanted large building. What a thing to be proud of. Their message to us is fighting this gigantic building proposed for Fairview is really a waste of our time, and you heard that tonight. I think the word for this attitude is extreme arrogance, and it's what we in Fairview will remember about the LDS representatives. I would also add, shame on the local leaders for stabbing our town in the back. They knew exactly the impact this building would have on our town, and obviously don't give a flip. It's really disappointing. There's no secret what the town of Fairview would have done with it or how we would have reacted. And if somebody didn't tell the folks from Salt Lake City, shame on y'all.
As you can see, there is a high degree of emotionality with this particular temple. Mayor Lesnar and the city council were not at all in favor of it. However, a number of Latter-day Saints certainly were. And the church itself announced the temple a couple of years ago, and they finally solidified everything here in 2024. The Fairview eventually denied the permit application for the Mormon temple, however, much to the chagrin of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Let's check that out.
Town in Collin County has been debating the size of this proposed temple for weeks. And tonight, hundreds of residents who say it's too big showed up to weigh in. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced the location for the large temple in Fairview, which is just minutes from McKinney. Sydney Persing was at tonight's meeting. She joins us now live with the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. What happened, Sydney?
Well, Izzy, after almost 3 hours here of this very long meeting, the commission voted to deny the church's application for a permit. That, though, is just a recommendation. It is not a final decision. And I'll get to what happens next here in a moment. But first, I just want to catch our viewers up on the background, the details really at the heart of this debate here in town. So as you mentioned, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wants to build a new temple here in Fairview. Thing is, it is really big. The 44,000 square foot building would include a spire that reaches 173 feet tall. That's 16 stories tall, and notably taller than city code allows. That's caused a controversy here in town. And tonight, the Planning and Zoning Commission heard from several church reps and supporters who argued the spire height is constitutionally protected from those zoning limits because it serves a religious purpose.
The building is constructed to reflect each of the members' faith.
The spire means hope in Jesus Christ. It means we can overcome adversity in our lives. It points to heaven.
But a slew of residents here, as you might imagine, disagree. They said the church is welcome here in town, but just not at that height. They called it unneighborly, obtrusive, disrespectful, and they told the commission they moved here for the small town residential country feel.
Why is the largest temple in Texas being shoehorned into a residential area in Fairview, Texas.
We warmly welcome the LDS temple to our great town of Fairview, but only if they follow the current zoning regulations.
And so again, the commission denied that permit here tonight after discussing how basically there are other churches, other temples in the area that have exceeded city code height restrictions, just not to quite that extent. But as I mentioned, this is a recommendation. It is not the final step in this fight, if you will. Next, city council will take up this issue. Chris?
All right. So, yeah, that was the second step of it where it got denied. And you can see that the church changed the narrative around the height of the temple. And it was specifically for the Fairview Temple, where they said that the spire was now part of LDS religious worship services, which was a great surprise to many people who had been associated with the LDS temple work for a number of years. It was eventually voted down by the city council 7-0. There was a number of lawsuits that were floated in the air. Everyone was expecting a long drawn out process where it could go to federal court, could cost the town of Fairview millions of dollars. The church lawyers were raring to go, but it went to mediation. And well, we finally do have somewhat of a resolution thanks to that mediation.
Well, tonight we are getting new details about the compromise involving a temple in Collin County. For months, there was an ongoing dispute about how tall the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints spire could be. Jobin Paniker takes us about 4 miles south of McKinney to Fairview, where the mayor walked him through the new agreement.
The city of Fairview and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have been in a months-long feud over construction of a new temple. Residents are concerned over its size. This week, there is progress, depending on who you ask.
And the big deal was to try to get them as close as possible to our zoning ordinances. That's what this is all about.
Fairview Mayor Henry Lesnar. Both sides met over mediation last week and compromise happened. The mayor sent us this proposed rendering. It looks different. A spire that was first proposed to go up 174 feet will now be 120 feet, short of the water tower. The building itself, once 65 feet, down to a one-story, 35-foot structure.
We're giving up a lot by letting it go up to 120 feet, but they gave up a lot from what they wanted. Seems like a decent compromise to us to avoid a lawsuit.
The initial design had the temple at 43,000 square feet. The newest conditionally approved proposal is 30,000 square feet.
We don't think that anyone should have more standing than anyone else. And as a homeowner, we feel that our property rights need to be protected.
Alicia Keeney is a member of Fairview United, a group opposing the build. She thinks this mediation agreement sets a bad precedent. She worries the city is acting out of fear, a lawsuit.
It's never been about them not having the temple. We really just want them to follow our laws and our town ordinances, just like we have to follow them.
The church sent WFAA this statement. We are grateful that town officials from Fairview were willing to discuss the concerns of the community with church representatives, and we were able to reach an agreement to move forward.
Well, two things still need to happen. The city wants to hear from residents. That'll happen likely next week. And then the church still needs to apply for permits. Reporting here in Fairview, I'm Jobin Paniker.
So Mayor Lesnar, the more that I hear from him, the more he seems like he's got a solid head on his shoulders. He was right where he said it was a decent compromise for both sides in order to avoid a lawsuit. And he hit the nail on the head there. We certainly covered this and every other article that we're going to talk about here on the Mormon News Roundup during this year. I even released this very conspiratorial video that I had, which was the secret no one is telling you about the Fairview Temple. This was one of the most viral clips that I had for the entire year, where I went through a very plausible reason that the church did the actions that it did. In fact, it's had, I think, one of my 1 or 2 most watched videos. You really should check it out. It is a conspiracy theory. So I don't know. Check it out. Let me know if you what you think about it. Okay, that takes us to our number 9 article, or number 9 biggest news story of the year. And this was the biggest Mormon movie of the year. And this was the Heretic movie with Hugh Grant, Chloe East, A24 Video Productions. A very, very good movie here. And I released a really, really good review that went over it. It's a 5-minute review, and it is entitled Heretic, the most chilling faith crisis film of the year. I really am very, very proud of this review. It is some of my best work because, of course, every Monday night on the Mormon Movie Reviews, we release a new review of a Mormon-themed film. So check this out. Heretic is one of the best films of the year. This new A24 film, Heretic, premiered this last Thursday during the 38th annual AFI Fest in Hollywood, California, at the historical TCL Chinese Theater. The writers, directors Scott Beck and Brian Woods were in attendance, as well as longtime Hollywood star Hugh Grant, alongside his young co-stars Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. Heretic follows the story of Sister Barnes, played by Thatcher, and Sister Paxton, played by East, young women with a well-intentioned and passionate mission to convert people to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Better known to some as Mormon missionaries, the two ladies face their greatest challenge when they arrive at the home of Mr. Reed, played by Grant, a seemingly normal, playful, and simple man who previously expressed interest in hearing more about the Mormon Church. What starts out as a cordial and pleasant discussion quickly becomes a wildly intricate game that preys upon confusion and fear as Mr. Reed shares a plethora of history and knowledge that conflicts with the young women's prideful beliefs. As the visit continues onward, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton are faced with having to question their faith or firmly hold on to their beliefs. Despite Mr. Reed's impressive attempts to sway skepticism, I don't want to give you any spoilers. Now, Beck and Woods, who also wrote the hit 2018 film A Quiet Place, are masters in being able to effectively and thoughtfully flip what the horror genre can be in modern cinema. Heretic, for a large majority of the film, could almost be rated PG to PG-13, as moviegoers are not bombarded with images of gore, violence, and torture. What makes this film so haunting is the brilliant and articulate way that Mr. Reed presents real-world facts to these women that many of us have never even heard about or thought about before. Let's just say that you will never look at the board game Monopoly and blueberries the same way after seeing this film.
Hey, I'm Brian Woods, and this is Scott Beck. We're the writer-directors of the new A24 film, Heretic.
We're thrilled to be sharing this movie with audiences at AFI Fest. Now, this is a horror movie, but it's not a horror movie about jump scares or monsters. It's a horror movie about ideas.
And it's about the one thing you're really not supposed to talk about.
Religion.
Religion.
Yeah.
That's right. So we really hope you enjoy the film.
Now, there are many fascinating aspects to Heretic as a unique horror film, but the fear of the unknown throughout this on-screen story is often the most chilling for the audience. When nothing at all is happening, but simply knowing it's what you don't know or see, at least yet, that makes it all the more terrifying. During a time in our world when wars are happening due to conflicting beliefs and ways of life that have been guided by stories from thousands of years ago, as well as living within a divisive political climate in places like America right now, where one's religion can often lead a voter's decision in who they want to see as their country's next leader, Heretic could not be any more timely and is an absolute must-see for people from all walks of life. Grant's portrayal as Mr. Reed is quite arguably the most captivating performance seen on any film this year. The real genius of this character is that he never really comes off as condescending or directly belittles the missionaries, but instead he presents thought-provoking facts that would create a sense of doubt in even the most devoted to one's faith. With Grant's Heretic performance, the world is reminded of how incredible he is as a longtime beloved actor, known for his roles in a wide range of genres throughout his illustrious career.
Well, he's infinitely complex, and that's always fun. Not what he seems, and very, very sick.
To be this cheeky British gentleman in reality, while being able to bring such a creepy and hypnotic performance to the screen, is truly exceptional. Thatcher and East also give excellent performances in Heretic as the two young women challenged to their very core, yet strive with all their might to somehow hold on to their humanity and their rather selfless beliefs, the very best that they can do in this unfathomable situation. Once again, A24 hits the jackpot with another outstanding film achievement in Heretic. You will undoubtedly leave the theater thinking about everything you just saw and heard long after the credits roll, which during a time with so many easy-to-binge options at our disposal is a most refreshing treat. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. So long. I am really thrilled, number one, about that movie review. I really think it was a very well done movie. I used the underscoring or the sound from the actual soundtrack. You got to hear from both the writer-director pair and Hugh Grant, got to know the basic plot and all of the opinion, all in less than 5 minutes. Absolutely top quality, great voiceover, put myself on the screen sometimes, well, not the entire time, which is obviously one of the reasons that it went viral. Look how many views this thing got. Wait a minute. 89? 89 views? Well, you know, folks, views aren't everything. What can I tell you? Hey, Jaden, welcome to the Mormon News Roundup. Glad to see you here. Obviously, there's been some other reviews that I've done of it as well. This isn't the only review. I released a couple of shorts that went along with it too. I'll just play that one for you as well, because this is an important Mormon movie, the most important Mormon movie of the year. Let me know what you think about this short.
Heretic, directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, is a chilling new horror starring Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East. The plot follows two young Mormon missionaries visiting Mr. Reed, whose initially cordial demeanor hides sinister intentions. As their visit escalates into an intellectual and psychological battle, Grant's portrayal of a seemingly benign but deeply manipulative character delivers a blend of wit and menace, challenging the missionaries' beliefs and exposing the fragility of faith. The film's early scenes shine with razor-sharp dialogue and dark humor, where philosophical debates on faith and belief unfold, drawing comparisons to A Quiet Place and Quentin Tarantino styles. However, the suspenseful buildup eventually gives way to conventional horror elements, with a final act that some critics felt stretched plausibility. Nonetheless, Heretic offers a gripping cerebral horror experience with Grant at his most unsettling, blending thought-provoking themes with genuine dread.
Also, a very solid short, if I don't say so myself. Obviously, there's been a lot of reviews, and this just got a lot of traction out there. It was the most important Mormon movie of the entire year. That's why it's number 9 on this year's countdown. And obviously, there's some bigger channels out there that took a look at it as well, including Alyssa Grenfeld. She did a review, which got how many views? How many? 416,000 reviews. That is very impressive. But like I said, this is a very important film, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those films that I might go back and watch again. That's how much I really enjoyed it. I give you my absolute highest endorsement. And for those of you out there, if you can just leave me a 5-star review, can hit the thumbs up, I'd be very grateful for that. I do have some people in the live chat. Thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate you see you here with a live show. Like I said, I'm a little bit under the weather, and I recorded this yesterday, but I got to re-record it for you because it's already ready to go. And counting down our list here, we're on number 8. And this is the most important Mormon book that's been released this year, and it's called Second Class Saints: Black Mormons and the Struggle for Racial Equality with Dr. Matthew Harris. I can't tell you how much I really enjoyed this book, and here's the Amazon reviews of it. You can see it's rated quite high here, 100 ratings. Second Class Saints: an in-depth account grounded in new archival discoveries of the most consequential development in Mormon history since the end of polygamy. And it's really traces the ending of the Mormon restriction on Black persons to both enter the temple and then Black males to hold the priesthood. Very, very important book. The most important book of the year. If you only read one Mormon book, in my opinion, for 2024, this is the book that you should definitely read. Now, Mr. Harris, or Dr. Harris, did a 17 or 18-part series over there on Mormon stories. I watched every single last one of those episodes. The lasting legacy of the LDS priesthood ban, where he walked through each and every one of his chapters and gave a bunch of behind-the-scenes information. Absolutely fascinating. I can listen to Dr. Harris talk about any topic, anytime, anywhere. And it's not just on Mormonism. You know, he has some legal YouTube stuff that he has that's just, he's a legal scholar as well. And he has also American history stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with the church. And I think I've listened to everything that I can possibly find of his. And he was even kind enough during this, I sent him a couple of emails about his book, and he was kind enough to respond. So he's also a heck of a nice guy. So let's hear from Dr. Harris himself and just have him summarize the book. And he went on the Cultural Hall podcast over there with Richie Stedman, and he summarized the book pretty well.
As a historian, what's more interesting is, how did Brigham Young differ, or how is he similar from his contemporaries? How is he different or similar from the prophet Joseph Smith? And so to recognize that leaders were racists and products of their culture, and that had racist views that were common in their generation, that should not be shocking to people. The story here should not be to sugarcoat, to sweeten, because millennials and others they see right through that.
Yes.
The story is, yes, it's true, President so-and-so was a racist back in the day. It's true. He was influenced by the broader American culture. But this is what the church teaches today. And that's why that race in the priesthood essay is so significant, because people could really share that. And I really wish this were not true, but I wish that essay and the other essays in that series had a greater circulation. Sometimes I'm still astonished that they've been out since 2013, a number of them, and there's still a number of Latter-day Saints who don't know anything about them.
Very, very solid book here. Can't more highly recommend it to you than that. And that's definitely why it appears in our top 10 list. Now, running right along here, our next up is President Nelson turning 100 years old. Of course, President Nelson is the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he managed to find that century mark here a few months ago, actually. It was just a couple of months ago. And the church celebrated that, and it was covered very widely across the entire world, really, because when a religious leader reaches that milestone, it's a nice little headline. So let's check it out. President Nelson's 100th birthday celebration.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. It was the 100th birthday celebration like no other. Russell M. Nelson, prophet and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, crosses the century mark.
To be in a room or in a meeting or in a conversation
wonderful. I express profound gratitude and love. The length of your life is not as important as the kind of life that you live. For each of us, even for a 100-year-old man, life passes quickly. My prayer is that you will let God prevail in your life. Prepare to return to live with Him again.
By the way, we run polls during these live streams, by the way. So if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to interact with the polls, by the way. And the poll this time for this particular segment is President Nelson turning 100. Is that impressive? Is that meh? Is that fake news? Or should he retire? And 60% of you said that he should retire. Now, there's a lot of quasi-prophet worship almost. The adoration is borderline worship, which is why I put together this somewhat irreverent short where I claimed that I had leaked information or leaked footage from that birthday celebration. I just see a lot of parallels here between a couple of dear leaders. I'll just put it that way. I just see a lot of parallels between our there's a couple of dear leaders, and they seem to have a lot in common. I can just put it that way, that's for sure. Okay, counting down the top 10 most important LDS news stories of the year here, we have finally gotten to number 6. And number 6 is Chad Daybell's trial and verdict. This was definitely an absolutely enormous story. There's no doubt about that. In case you weren't listening to it, the prophet of doom has reached his conviction for his triple homicide. Shocking stuff here. Let's hear what's going on with Chad Daybell.
The dramatic scene inside an Idaho courtroom where convicted triple murderer Chad Daybell was sentenced to death. ABC's Alex Prochet joins us now with more. Good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning, Janae. It was the details of this case that were especially heinous, which is why once Chad Daybell was found guilty on all 8 counts against him, the prosecution sought the death penalty, and the jury agreed.
The court is directed that the defendant would be sentenced to death on those counts.
Chad Daybell sat emotionless as a jury of his peers sealed his fate. And this morning, the so-called doomsday author sentenced to death after being convicted in the 2019 murders of his first wife, Tammy Daybell, and his second wife's 2 children, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow.
This is the best justice we can possibly get. It brings closure for everybody that's been hurt.
The 2 children were last seen in September of 2019. Prosecutors say Daybell and his now wife, Lori Vallow, claimed their kids were zombies and conspired with Lori's brother, Alex Cox, to kill them. After nearly 10 months of searching and working the case, investigators found Tylee and JJ's bodies buried in shallow graves in Daybell's backyard in Idaho. Prosecutors say Tammy Daybell died at the hands of another due to asphyxiation. Lori Vallow, who by then was already in custody, was heard talking to Daybell on a jailhouse phone call during the search of his home.
Were they in the house?
No, they're out to the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching.
The jury in this case listened to over 60 witnesses, but it took them just about 9 hours to recommend the death penalty. FBI investigator Doug Hart telling us their verdict didn't surprise him.
There are certain cases that just stick with you. This is going to be one of those for you.
Oh, absolutely, both personally and professionally. At the end of the day, there are victims who senselessly were killed, and that loss and that pain is very real for their loved ones and their families. It's very real for us.
Lori Vallow received a sentence of life without parole last year, and investigator Hart tells me that yesterday was emotional for his team, and as they were preparing to leave the courthouse, they were applauded by the families of the victims. After 5 years, Gio, they're finally getting closure.
They are, and so many disturbing details in this case. All right, Alex, thank you.
I do think that I found the best sum up for you, by the way, in case you hadn't been following Chad Daybell. And what people out there really are interested in when it comes to Mormonism is sex, drugs, rock and roll, and true crime. That's really what turns the eyeballs here. And this was probably the biggest Mormon crime story of the year here, which is why it got to number 6. It was covered on mainstream news. You can see this isn't East Idaho news here. This was ABC. All these verdicts, a lot of them were streamed live. Very, very big story. Absolutely horrific here. Of course, Lori Vallow's already been sentenced to prison. She's already been found guilty. Now he has to. And maybe this trial got just a little less attention than hers, because by the time she was convicted, it was very unlikely that he was going to be able to get off, because their crimes were very, very similar. In fact, he's the one who suffocated his wife. At least Lori didn't do that. So some pretty disturbing stuff here. Quite frankly, it turns my stomach so much that I didn't cover it on the Mormon News Roundup maybe as much as I could, because it is definitely hard to watch here. So anyway, our number 5 story of the year here is there's just so many lawsuits that hit the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's hard to keep track of all of them. But I'm just going to give you a couple that really rocked the boat here, because the church gets sued left, right, and center. Probably the most important lawsuit here was the one that was brought by James Huntsman. And this was earlier in the year, and I'll give you an update to this as to, in my opinion, this is the most important lawsuit of the year.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is asking a federal judge to throw out a lawsuit filed by a member of a high-profile Utah family. James Huntsman, the brother of former Governor John Huntsman Jr., is suing the church for fraud. He's demanding a refund of tithing dollars he gave to the church over the years. Specifically, he accuses the church of improperly spending money on the City Creek Mall project. But the church is firing back. In new court documents, lawyers for the faith say Huntsman is seeking a refund because he's having a crisis of faith. The church maintains no tithing money was used to fund the massive development project in downtown Salt Lake City. A judge has scheduled a hearing at the end of the month to decide whether to dismiss the lawsuit.
Yeah, so the lawsuit was not dismissed. Of course, it was appealed. When he originally filed it, he lost it, so he appealed it up to the appeals court level. At the appeals court level, and this is all in the, I think it was the 7th Circuit out there on the East Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. I believe that's the 7th Circuit. A portion of his lawsuit was upheld, which is the portion that he said, James Huntsman said, I gave donations to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with the idea, or I was told repeatedly, that those donations would be used to alleviate human suffering. And it turns out that they were used to do nothing except for build a luxury mall, namely the City Creek Center development project, which the church plowed, I think it was $1.5 billion into, as memory serves. And also, actually, I think it was $2.5 billion. I don't know, it was $1 or $2 billion into, and also the beneficial life. Well, the beneficial life part of James Huntsman's lawsuit was thrown out, but the court upheld the part about the City Creek Mall, meaning that the church leaders, senior church leaders, including Gordon Hinckley himself, said that tithing would not be used to fund the City Creek Mall. However, it appears that the tithing did go for the building of the City Creek Mall. So then James Huntsman went ahead and now appealed that decision to the full panel, or the church appealed. See, let me back it up. When Huntsman won a part of the lawsuit, the church appealed that to the full panel. And that was just heard a couple of months ago. And we're still waiting for the results of that full panel. Now, if James Huntsman is not able to get his tithing money back from the church, I think it is very unlikely that anyone may be able to do it ever. Okay, this is just a very, very important case. Now, just with one caveat here, I do have a video on the Mormon News Roundup which talks about the only time that people have gotten their tithing back from suing the church. If you search on Mormon News Roundup for that particular video, you will find it. And I believe I'm the only one who's got a really good video on that out there. So I'll just leave that for you as a little tidbit. Now, another church lawsuit that was very, very important here was the Gaddy lawsuit that was filed. And basically, the Gaddy lawsuit is arguing that Laura Gaddy on Monday, she had a scathing 75-page class action lawsuit against the church, and represented by Salt Lake City attorney Kay Birmingham. And Gaddy claims that the church misrepresented the foundational history of Mormonism and twisted it, and therefore didn't give her the complete picture. So let's just hear a quick summary of this Gaddy lawsuit here, which was also a pretty big lawsuit from this year.
Laura Gaddy on Monday filed a scathing 75-page class action against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Represented by Salt Lake City attorney Kay Birmingham, Gaddy claims the church, which claimed 16 million members worldwide in 2018, twisted the foundational history of Mormonism in a fraudulent scheme perpetrated for generations. The material facts upon which Mormonism is based have been manipulated through intentional concealment, misrepresentation, distortion, and/or obfuscation by the LDS to contrive an inducement to faith in Mormonism's core beliefs.
Yep, there's your basic sum up here. And of course, we have both sides of this particular lawsuit line up. The Gaddy lawyers basically said that, hey, the church withheld vital information, namely the rock and the hat, the various Book of Mormon translational issues, the seer stone, things like how the Book of Mormon came forward. There was a number of factual misrepresentations by the church regarding its history. In other words, the church knew what the true history, or at least what a better representation of history was, instead had a faith-promoting narrative which was deceitful, or at least duplicitous, and said, I would have never given tithing to the church if I had known these particular claims that the church now cops to, thanks to things like the Gospel Topics essays. The church lawyers responded that said, we can teach our history however we want. This is a First Amendment of the Constitution issue. The courts have absolutely no business in wading into how religions teach theology, history, or anything else. This is also heard. It was heard in Denver, and we're still waiting for the results of that particular lawsuit as well. Now, once James Huntsman's lawsuit, if I can just return to that for a minute here, once James Huntsman's lawsuit was adjudicated, or at least partially upheld, there was a number of copycat lawsuits that attempted to copy what he did. And a number of those have been rolled into one lawsuit in the Salt Lake City venue under the auspices of Judge Shelby. I put together a video that talked about that for a minute, and it's only a couple minutes long. So let's take a look at what these are called copycat lawsuits. In other words, they take the template that James Huntsman had, and they just copy it because that part of the lawsuit was partially upheld.
A financial storm is brewing for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the LDS Church. A string of class action lawsuits is currently threatening to shake the foundation of this religious institution. From the mountains of Utah to the bustling streets of California, allegations of financial misconduct are making waves. The LDS Church is under fire, facing lawsuits in Utah, Illinois, Tennessee, Washington, and California. The bone of contention? Accusations that the church fraudulently used tithing funds, which are considered sacred, to finance a luxury mall in Salt Lake City. The church's leaders stand accused of misleading their faithful flock about how these funds were being used. Adding to the church's legal woes is the latest lawsuit out of California. An elderly couple is seeking a refund of $40,000, claiming they were duped into contributing to a fund that was misused. These lawsuits all share a common thread. They accuse the LDS Church of misleading its members and misusing sacred tithing funds. But what exactly are these lawsuits claiming, and why should we care? At the heart of the allegations is the testimony of a whistleblower. This individual asserts that tithing funds, contributions made by church members, were considered sacred within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yet it's alleged that these sacred funds were transferred to finance a luxury mall in Salt Lake City. The lawsuits also spotlight a personal fraud case brought forward by James Huntsman. Huntsman contends that he was misled about how his substantial tithing, to the tune of $5 million, was used by the church. He now seeks a return of these funds. The church, in its defense, argues that these lawsuits pose a threat to religious liberty and the autonomy of the church. They contend that how they manage their funds is a matter of internal governance, protected by the constitutional right to freedom of religion. It's a complex web of allegations and defenses with significant implications for the LDS Church and its followers. So where does all this leave the LDS Church and its members? Well, these lawsuits have the potential to significantly impact the church and its followers. If the allegations are proven, this could cause a dramatic shift in the church's financial practices and the trust of its members. These lawsuits have brought into light a settlement between the church and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The settlement was over the church creating shell companies to evade reporting laws. This revelation could further strain the relationship between the church and its members, raising questions about transparency and accountability. To recap, The lawsuits allege that the LDS Church fraudulently used tithing funds to finance a luxury mall. They argue that the church misled members about how those funds were being used. In response, the church has defended its actions, stating that these lawsuits threaten religious liberty and church autonomy. Regardless of the outcome, these lawsuits are likely to leave a lasting impact on the LDS Church and its members, potentially reshaping the way religious institutions handle their finances.
Well, there you have it, folks. Those are those copycat lawsuits, and those are still going through the basic preliminary stages here. Okay, our number 4 most important LDS news story of 2024, again, in my humble estimation, is the new transgender policy update. This was a big deal here. I got a couple of news stories, and then I also have a little bit of commentary on it. Let's bring you up to speed here, because the LDS Church now defines what transgender members can and cannot do in a new handbook policy. This came out about 4 months ago.
Yeah, hey, Kelly and Bob. So the church says they were receiving a lot of questions from their leaders just as to what transgender members could do within the church, what the guidelines were. So they came up with this policy. Now, we spoke with some advocates with the transgender community who say this is definitely a start, but it's not perfect.
It's 38 chapters long, a handbook full of pages and pages of policies and instructions guiding the way for LDS church leaders.
It's been evolving from administrative procedures to a more ministerial voice.
But it's chapter 38, section 6, subsection 21 that's gaining a lot of attention.
I think there has been a need for clarity.
A policy on transgender individuals.
We've had an increase in questions. What can a transgender person do? What are the guidelines?
The policy tries to set it straight, saying transgender people can be baptized, confirmed, take part in sacrament, and receive priesthood blessings. But when it comes to priesthood ordination or temple ordinances, it will be based on the gender assigned at birth. They continue advising against sex reassignment surgeries and social transitioning, which would result in membership restrictions like receiving priesthood, a temple recommend, or church callings. But say members can be called by their preferred name in the ward. Basically,
we should create a warm, welcoming environment for all. At the same time, the policy clarifies that some things in the church are gender specific.
Seems simple enough, right?
It's a lot more complicated than that.
Well, those with the transgender community say that's part of the problem.
I think there's still a lot of kind of misperceptions. All transgender people don't identify as someone of the opposite sex.
Still, she says this discussion is welcomed.
Creating a welcoming space will go a long way.
She just hopes it will continue.
We're not just purely male or purely female. And when we get to an understanding of that, I think we'll start pulling this apart.
Now, the handbook as a whole is an e-handbook. The church says that will allow them to continue to revisit and make changes as needed. Live at Temple Square, L. Thomas, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Okay, I've got another news article here that's going to bring you up to speed on the transgender as well. Get a couple more perspectives in there. And then I'm also going to talk about when I had Abby Hansen on the Mormon News Roundup. That was a really, really big episode because she's one of the OG Mormon feminists, and she really laid down the law with regards to this new update. Gave a lot of good insights in here. So I'm going to turn it over to the news clip and then let Abby talk about the ramifications of the new transgender policy updates. This is about an 8-minute clip.
That does take us to our final article here, and this is the biggest news article of the week. Well, this is a thunderbolt across the bloggernacle and across the church as well. It's the direction on transgender individuals' care of sacred clothing included in church handbook update, a major update here on new transgender policies in the church. Let's watch this video and see what the church has done with regards to the new guidance on transgender members.
Well, Brian, Sarah, first off, the church says anyone not seeking a type of transition from their assigned sex at birth can still enjoy all the privileges that come with church membership, they say. Now, one former ward bishop, acknowledges the changes made today can be difficult for transgender kids.
I'm going to be supportive of the church, its doctrine, its leaders, and not advocating for changes, but I just recognize also that is painful for transgender Latter-day Saints because they can't fit in this binary.
Richard Ostler hosts Listen, Learn, and Love, a podcast where LGBTQ plus church members share their experience.
I had to listen to trans people to better understand how to support trans people in the reality of their situation.
Church leaders say they're against people pursuing surgical and medical transitions, or a person changing their names, pronouns, or the way they dress.
The disciple of Christ is to validate your pain, sit with you in your pain, and listen to your story, and not say things like you're overthinking this or you should not feel this way. Transgender people may be hurt by these statements and by these restrictions.
Updates in the church's general handbook say taking these actions will lead to some church membership restrictions. That includes receiving or exercising the priesthood, getting a temple recommend, and serving in church callings.
First thing I'd say is there's nothing the church has put out to say that the reality of your situation is invalid. They're not pointing to a random study dismissing the reality of people that feel gender dysphoria.
The First Presidency says anyone is still welcome to attend sacrament meeting, even if they do transition from their assigned sex at birth.
Okay, Abby, this is the first part of this episode. We're going to be dissecting this in great detail here in a moment and get into the actual details here. But what are your first thoughts on the church's update to the handbook of instruction with regards to the transgender members? I'm really glad that I have you on this particular episode because I know that this is an issue that is near and dear to your heart.
We planned to do an episode together a couple months ago, 3 months ago. It's been a while, and we had no idea what the news topics were going to be the week that we ended up recording. And the fact that the transgender handbook changes, it feels like the universe like knew what topics I would want to talk about. I will say first, I am so sorry. Like, I get really emotional here, and it's just so dorky. I don't know, I can't talk about this without crying, but I love the transgender community so much, and people who are non-binary, genderqueer, gender expansive, whatever term they are comfortable with. I remember hearing an author talk about, I can't remember the author who said it, but she talked about finally getting so fed up with the system that she was ready to throw her body onto the cogs of the machine to stop it because it was hurting so many people. And that's how I feel. I feel that way about multiple things. I feel that way about equality for women and girls in the church. And I feel that way about all LGBTQ issues, but I have such a special place in my heart for the trans community. I have so many things that I can say about this topic. So I had an interesting experience that taught me about what it means to be transgender and the science and the biology behind it, that it's not something that's just in people's head, that it's not a mental illness, that they're not just making it up, and especially that they're not just choosing to sin. So I want anyone who is watching this, I know a transgender person, a closeted or out trans person or non-binary person, or someone who's just not sure what they are yet, might be watching this, and I want them to know that they are perfect and that we are the ones who are wrong. The rest of the world, we are still trying to figure this out, and we will catch up at some point, but nothing is wrong with you. You are perfect. I had a BYU professor back the fall of 1999. His name is Bill Bradshaw, and I took Biology 101 from him in the Joseph Smith Memorial Building in the auditorium with like hundreds of other freshmen. And I just would have forgotten about him and never thought about him again. But over the years, Bill Bradshaw remains to this day an active, faithful member of the LDS Church. He has served as a mission president, so he's had higher callings. I mean, he's a very active, engaged man. He also has a gay son. And he also has, I can't remember, one or two, I think 2 PhDs in biology, in something smart. He knows a lot about biology, and he knows a lot about human biology. And as a biologist, he looked at his gay son and said, my son came out of the womb fabulous, like very different than his brothers. And he said, this is not a choice. Like, my gay son did not choose to be gay. He has always been this way. And so Bill Bradshaw, with all of his brilliance and his Latter-day Saint faith, he really began to study the biological backgrounds and causes of homosexuality. And he has expanded into other topics like, why is someone transgender? So it was really interesting to me. I had been learning a lot about and I had been making a lot of friends in the trans world over the years. And then in the fall of 2019, I went to a class taught by Bill Bradshaw. It was such a come round full circle moment for me, to such an incredible class that he taught at an Encircle event. And it was an hour-long class on the biological causes of being transgender. And I was like, am I 18 years old again? like I'm sitting here listening to my BYU professor talk about this. For anyone watching this who, even if you're a progressive Mormon or you're an active Mormon or a post-Mormon and you're like, I still just can't quite get, oh, there you go, you found him. Yes, that's Bill Bradshaw. Just a fantastic human being. If you don't understand what it means to be transgender yet, and you're still thinking, I don't understand how someone can have a male body and then just decide one day they're female, it sounds crazy, it sounds creepy, it sounds weird, it sounds odd, it sounds like they're mentally ill. There's lots of great resources online, Bill Bradshaw is one of them, to understand that it is part of normal, beautiful, expansive human biology. What I came to understand from him is that most of us have basically a kindergarten level understanding of how human biology and our gender and sex work. We just think like there's male and there's female, and you're one of the two, and you get together and make babies, and that's kind of how it works. But it's so much more complex and so much more beautiful than that. There's a lot of other things that I have a kindergarten level understanding of, like how electricity works. If the general population doesn't really understand how electricity works or how the weather really works, other than this very basic kindergarten level, it doesn't hurt anyone. But the fact that so many of us have this kindergarten level understanding of how human biology, when it comes to sex, works, it's hurting people. I don't feel like it's right for us to all live in ignorance and misinformation. And Bill Bradshaw taught me, he's like, there is male, there is female, and then there's this beautiful transition between the two. We always look at one way, we always look at just external genitalia on a baby, and we say if it's a boy or a girl. But and all these things you can go and research other places, but there's chromosomes and hormones and what type of gonads, and does this body make sperm or eggs or both? There's so many different ways where people don't fit on this binary carefully and closely. I would just want people to understand, if they don't already, that this is not something in people's heads. There are people who are born with bodies that look female at birth, but they really are on the spectrum over here, and they're much more comfortable masculine presenting, or they're in the middle and they're non-binary and they're like, really, I could go either way. To take something that is the way you're born, like some people are born with red hair, some people are born with dark skin, some people are born missing a leg, some people have an extra toe. The beauty of the human experience is so expansive, and to put it in a tiny little box where we only have male and we only have female is just so short-sighted, and we miss so much beauty. When somebody is born anywhere in here, the binary male and female here, and they're born somewhere along here, and they come and they tell us, you know what, you guys are all putting me in the female box, and I feel incredibly uncomfortable there. I need to transition to the gender that I feel comfortable in and that I feel like really represents me and my spirit. I know a lot of active LDS members who are trans who love the proclamation on the family where it says gender is eternal, because they say, yeah, I know, I've been a man for all of eternity and I will be a man for all of eternity. And through a birth defect or an earthly challenge, I was born in a body that doctors said looked like female when I was born, but I know that my spirit is a man. Basically, Bill Bradshaw just said, look, people know when they're transgender. They know when something is up. And a lot of times you don't prove it until later in life when they have a major abdominal surgery and they cut open a woman and they tell her, oh, do you know you have 2 testicles inside of you? And she says, oh my gosh, I have never felt fully female. This makes so much sense. People know, just like you know when you have appendicitis or you need your gallbladder out and you say something is wrong, something's hurting inside. I know I'm having pain. I know something's wrong. I need to change something. If we just looked at them and said, yeah, you look fine to me. I'm uncomfortable with you writhing in pain on the floor. Could you please stop and just sit up and act normal? That's what we're telling people who are transgender. It's not a small thing. I think we take the idea that prophets and apostles don't have to have any kind of earthly training or any credentials in an area to speak on a topic. That goes back to 14 fundamentals of following the prophet, if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am, for sure.
That's wrong. We need experts. We need people like Bill Bradshaw. Oh, and the greatest thing that I loved about him was at the end of that class that I went to back in 2019, someone raised their hand and said, Dr. Bradshaw, are you concerned about church discipline? Because what you're teaching goes against like church doctrine. And he said, are you worried about like getting excommunicated or something? What will happen to you? And Bill Bradshaw just sighed and he said, the only thing I worry about is that I am getting really old and I'm not going to be around that much longer. There is so much education that still needs to happen at all levels of the church. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried I might die before I get a chance to tell enough people about this.
Boy, when I ask you to give some introductory comments, you don't hold back, do you?
You know what? Anyone who knows me knows I can talk for a very long time.
That is a good thing, and that's why your blog posts are so great. Now,
now, if you want to hear more of any of these articles for that matter, whether it's the transgender policy, which was episode 129, or any of the other news articles here, you can definitely find them here on the Mormon News Roundup. We got to get you out of here in less than an hour and a half. That's the goal here for today. The transgender policy update was definitely something that was covered in national news. It was covered in the New York Times. Anything, because the Mormon Church has a significant reputation as an anti-LGBTQ institution. A lot of media outlets are left-leaning, so anything that is perceived as being harmful to the gay community is going to be picked up by the national press, and this certainly was. A lot of the right-wing Mormons, if you want to call them that, people like Jacob Hansen, people like Greg on Quick Media, they celebrated this particular decision. And in fact, in that particular episode that you just saw, episode 129, we queued up a couple of Greg's clips where he applauded this decision. And we gave our opinion that we thought that this was a significant step backwards in the church's progress. Now, our next article, number 3, we've only got 3 left to go here, folks. Number 3 article of the year is the Temple Garment Update. Now, the Salt Lake Tribune had this listed as their number 1 most watched or most clicked on or most read article of the year. I have it listed as number 3, but I can definitely see an argument for why it might be higher. And I've got a couple of takes here in case you're not at all familiar with the Mormon temple garments here. Let's get Rebecca from the Mormonish podcast and get her take on it.
Finally, the women's dry stretch open sleeve chemise and full slip or half slip LDS garments have arrived, but only if you live in Africa. These new variations to the traditional sleeved garment can only be shipped to Africa and can only be purchased if your home country is in Africa. The church website won't allow you to enter a different country than your records indicate. The pricing on the new open sleeve tank top garments is interesting. 16 cents for the top, 23 cents for the full slip, and 15 cents for the half slip. Will these new tank top garments be available worldwide soon? Or will Latter-day Saints simply cut the sleeves off their existing garments now that the option is available? Would that be okay? Not okay? Let me know what you think.
I doubt you will see a lot of people cutting their current garments off, but these are highly anticipated. A lot of people really looking forward to this change. It is very controversial for sure. Let's get another take here with Radio Free Mormon over there on the Mormon Newscast about the temple garment change.
But basically, my understanding is, and what I've heard is that generally it is the shoulder that has been one of the main fashion problems that women have had with the garment over the years. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's what really sets you apart. Normal women everywhere wear no sleeves. And so to not be able to do that, it just sets you completely apart. Men, the men's garment, it looks like a regular t-shirt and boxer brief. There's not too many things that you're not going to be able to wear, but a woman, absolutely. Or to wear, a shirt like this and then a t-shirt under it. How many of us did that? Ruined a sundress, ruined it. Yeah, exactly. This is a good one. Yeah, it really sets you apart. Which we were told was the point,
Will
right?
Ferrell. Yeah, Will Ferrell, show your shoulders and I'll torture you in hell forever. Mormon God in 2024. Let's see what you've got under those sleeves, girl.
That is a good one, Bill. The most, in my opinion, we covered this as well, obviously, on the Mormon News Roundup. In my opinion, the most heartfelt take on this came from Lindsay Hansen Park over there. You're a polygamy podcaster, also the executive producer of the Sunstone Foundation. And she gave a really heartfelt and deeply emotional, in my opinion, post about the new garment changes where, is this progress or is it a problem? The OG Mormon feminist over there, consultant for Under the Banner of Heaven and a number of other shows here. I voiced her Facebook post the best that I could. I tried to pick a voice that conformed as much as I could to Lindsay Hansen Park. I've gotten in some trouble before by picking the wrong voices. I try to get voices that match the people who are speaking. Not always 100% accurate in that, but this is a very heartfelt post about the changes to the garment update.
Actually, I have more thoughts on the LDS garment change. I woke up with a rage down in my belly about it, about the absolute futility that this change now validates, the realization of how carelessly absurd it all is. Attribute it to whatever you like, but it is emblematic of the rotten fruitlessness of these senseless, painful, and arbitrary rules. How can something seriously dumb engender so much rage? Do you know, can you possibly know, unless you've lived it like so many of us LDS women, how many tedious minutes, hours, years of our lives were impacted by the cut of cheap, shitty fabric that we believe was a symbol of our commitment to God? Garments manufactured in factories by underpaid workers dictated not just by faith, but by a system that never considered the toll on our bodies, our time, and our well-being. We spent how much time focused on the narrative of shoulder. Dear God, what time you must have to waste. Why would we believe that these things mattered or came from God in the first place? Because our culture was obsessed with it. The garment design got in between mothers and daughters, between sisters and friends. It entered the marriages of every single devout couple and sent them directives and messages about how to view one another, their relationships and commitments, and themselves. And just like that, the unchanging rule of the sanctity of our skin is cut away with new garment updates. What a thing! Such a stupid, hollow thing where many of our faithful will argue that it's small and insignificant and continuing revelation, and whatever arsenal they will continue to expend on something that is both so tedious and full of tremendous magnitude. And the rest of us will react with equal rage and energy and worship the emptiness that was offered up as life-giving doctrine. That's the encapsulation of the bankrupt theology my generation inherited from old men in downtown Salt Lake City. Dudes whose best crack at God was a laborious amount of effort expressed in sermons, pamphlets, and endless activities and performances of the dangers of women's shoulder. All because they clearly lacked the skills, the will, and creativity to come up with theology that actually propelled us towards being better people, instead of turning our shame internally at ourselves. So much time wasted trying to find clothes that covered my shoulders. So much twisting of my brain to make these covenants reflect in the public performance of fashion. So much signaling to others to stay in line. So much shame. While I feel a sense of relief knowing that future generations won't have to endure this, and I'm glad for the change, that doesn't mean I'm at peace with how it was handled. It was a weird and frankly creepy rule, one that poisoned our men with reinforcements and bad ideas about the female body. It's one that allowed women to literally measure someone's worth by the length of their clothing. And just like that, all the damage, weirdness, and unmeasurable, futile, stupid suffering will be swept away. Here's what this change actually tells us. Mormonism, despite all of its grand promises, is a tribute to the mediocrity of old men. Yeah, good for future women. Truly, truly. No one should endure that. But those of us who wore out our truly terrible collective sexual dysfunction on our backs, we're never getting that back unless we claim it. And even then, to see how absolutely pointless this is the exact reason I will never stop having my rage aimed to match the tediousness of the most hollow, insignificant nonsense that we grew up thinking God cared about. God is so big, they told us, and then they showed us how small he was. And then they trimmed him down even further, once again, on our shoulder line.
Yeah, when I did I guess we'll call it a dress rehearsal for today's episode, where I actually recorded the entire episode, hour and a half. It was all wasted. I actually was very emotional at that time. Luckily, I am keeping it together because I really think that that is the single best take on the entire Mormon garment fiasco. Now, looking at our poll here, I asked those viewers out there in the live chat, I said, what about this garment change? Do you think it's too little too late, or are you very excited? And 80% of people say that it is far too little, far too late. And that is certainly a sentiment that I can appreciate. Now, we are down to the number 2 biggest news article of the year. And this is really a conglomeration of a number of different articles here. And I hate to do this to you, but it's really the totality of the church's massive real estate moves. It is hard to encapsulate that. And I could spend a long time showing all of the different purchases that the church made. I'm only going to show you a couple of them because the church spends a huge amount of money on real estate every year. And it is not widely reported within the church and sometimes without the church. This particular video here that you see, it asks, why did the Mormon church spend $300 million on a farm? And this is the only video on the entire internet that covers this particular topic on this particular purchase. You'll only find out about it if you want to watch a video right here on the Mormon News Roundup. So let's check out what the church is doing with real estate this year, which was yet another year where the church spent hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on real estate.
What's something people don't know about the Mormon church? They're now huge farmland owners in Australia, so what's the church up to in Queensland? It's snatching up farmland. Their subsidiary, Farmland Reserve, just bought over 64,000 acres of cropland. And get this, the price tag was more than $300 million, including water rights. Why, you ask? Well, Australian agriculture is a hot ticket right now. Investors love it for its strong global reputation and the potential for solid returns. But there's more to this story. In 2022, the church's financial practices in Australia came under the microscope. There were questions about whether they were dodging taxes by forming a charitable trust fund. Despite the scrutiny, the church sees a goldmine in Aussie farmland. They've joined a $1.1 billion American push, showing massive confidence in Australia's $84 billion agriculture sector. So what's next? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. The Mormon church is betting big on the land down under.
Farmers! I usually put a little joke at the end of my videos if I can remember to put one in. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily like these AI videos, but really this gives you everything that you need in literally a minute. It's part of a consortium of $1.1 billion in purchases. The church represents like 300 million of it. And what did they say? I believe it was like 65,000 acres. I have to go back and check my notes there, which is just a huge amount. Now, to nip it in the bud here, I just want to say here that these purchases are used for these farm purchases that the church does throughout the world, not just in Queensland, Australia, but also in the United States and in many other places, are almost exclusively used for commercial purposes. In other words, the church buys the farm and then they will lease that farmland to someone else, and that person will pay them property rents. Or the church will itself use the farms and then sell the products, whether it's livestock, whether it's citrus, whatever what do they call it? A cash grain. I'm not a farmer. Whatever the crop is that the church raises, they will sell that for a profit. Almost none of it is going to be used for humanitarian giving. And I do have a video that is going to be coming out here in about a month. It's already recorded. It's like a 35-minute video, which is entitled Arguing with Crazies About It's called Arguing with Crazies About Mormon Farms, because that's what the members do when they come in. They say, oh, isn't it great that the church dropped $300 million on this farm? It's going to help so many people. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to help the Mormon church's bottom line. And like I said, I could show you 10 of the videos for this entire year of all the church's huge purchases, both in Queensland, in Florida, and in Arizona, and in Nebraska, and in Utah. Everywhere across the world, the church has an insatiable desire for real estate. It's really uncanny, which is why the church is the #1 holder of private real estate by valuation in the United States, and #2 by acreage, only behind the Emerson family, which is a huge family that owns a bunch of timberland up in the Northwest. I'm just going to show you one other video here about the church's real estate moves. And the reason that I have this so high here is, once again, look, the temple garments, the reason that I don't have it any higher, even though the Salt Lake Tribune had it as #1, is that the church boasts about 18 million members, or it claims that many, but only about 4 million of them actually go to church. And out of that, only about half of them are adults. And out of that, only about half of those actually have been endowed, and then only maybe 75% of them actually wear the garments. So we're talking about 750,000 people that the garments will actually personally affect themselves. These farmlands affect everyone in the communities. It drives up the prices of real estate in those areas. And because the church often buys these using its nonprofit arms of its, and we have Deseret Management Corporation, which is the church's umbrella corporation for all of its commercial entities and commercial operations. And underneath that, you have farm reserves, ag reserves, and a number of different church-owned commercial properties which are in the agricultural industry. And some of those are, nonprofits, and the church doesn't pay property taxes on all of these in the same way that a normal commercial business would, although it definitely does pay some taxes. It's rather complicated. So it definitely affects everyone when the church comes and swoops in and drops this amount of money for either a bunch of acres or for a bunch of farms, or a lot of times what we saw in 2024 is the church is buying commercial properties. They will buy an apartment complex that's worth $100 or $150 million in downtown Miami, and then they will lease all of those apartment complex, all of those individual units out to people. That's what we saw in Orlando. That's what we saw in Queen Creek. That's one of the church's go-to strategies. Now, as far as, I'll show you one other clip here for the church real estate. We could talk about this all day, really, but trying to get it to you in about an hour here. Hey, Rebecca, thanks so much for joining the Mormon News Roundup. Great to see you. Really appreciate you dropping by. Here's just one other example of the church in the real estate sphere here, talking about annexing a huge swath in Orlando. Now, of course, we cover all of these as they happen on the Mormon News Roundup, but the church is really annexing a huge amount of property. I want to say it's 150,000 acres. Let's just watch this clip and bring you up to speed.
In Orange County now, we saw protests tonight outside Orlando City Hall over how to handle growth in what could be the next big boomtown area of Central Florida. It's all over an enormous empty area, about 10 times the size of Walt Disney World. The Deseret Ranch stretches through Orange, Osceola, and Brevard counties. It's been owned for more than 7 decades by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the Mormons, they want Orlando to annex about 52,000 acres of the ranch for development. That area alone is twice as big as Disney, but they're slowly weighing long-term plans for all 300,000 acres owned by the church. News 6's Treasure Robert shows us why the protesters want a no vote.
You guys do a good job, but you're not getting it right. You need to listen to the people. Let us vote.
Concerned taxpayers Monday took their fight to the Orlando City Council chambers.
Now, if Deseret Ranch's true effort was to actually conserve the land, they would not be doing this in the first place.
They're pushing back against an effort by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to annex 52,000 acres of its Deseret Ranch property to the city of Orlando. Their land is highlighted in red. It sits between the Orlando International Airport and the Space Coast. The Mormon Church wants to annex the portion that falls under the jurisdiction of unincorporated Orange County.
With the full development plan, what percentage of the 52,000 acres will remain environmentally protected?
The short answer to your question is there's no answer to your question, because we're not asking for anything other than to be part of the city rather than part of the county.
That's Gary Hunter, the attorney representing the landowners. He says there is no development plan, adding they are happy to work with city staff to create one in the future.
If you own a piece of property, you have a large say in what you get to do with that property.
Most commissioners are leaning toward approving the proposal.
If they're willing to follow our rules and regs, I don't see why the government should step in and tell them they can't.
But just one said no.
I don't believe it is Orlando's responsibility to clean up someone else's mess.
Kelly Simrad, an activist, says citizens' concerns are not being validated.
It's irresponsible overdevelopment and it should be stopped. It should not be promoted. And what this council did today, it's very disappointing.
In November, county voters can weigh in on 2 ballot amendments that would establish a rural boundary. Activist Lee Perry believes that's why the city is trying to quickly push this annexation through.
We, the people, want to have the ability to vote. This is our democratic process.
In Orlando, Treasure Roberts, Getting Results, News 6.
As Treasure mentioned, the Mormons want Orlando to act before Orange County voters go to the polls. On the ballot, 2 amendments to the county charter One would make it much harder for cities like Orlando to annex unincorporated land. The other would establish rural boundaries. It would ban large developments in those areas without a majority plus one commission vote. For a guide to those amendments and all of the key races and issues on the ballot.
Okay, I jumped in there a little bit early. Shows what kind of a Bush League podcaster I am. Obviously, this is my first rodeo, especially since I wasted an entire draft of this before this. But anyway, you can see that these real estate moves often have large ramifications across communities here. We're talking about, I misspoke. I said 150,000 acres. It was just 50,000 acres. My understanding is that this is still an ongoing thing here. That Deseret citrus farm there is a farm that David O. McKay purchased back, I believe it was in 1959. I actually have a video on that. I guess I'd better go back and watch my own video about how the church came to acquire that property and how truly vast that is, how much money the church makes on the Deseret citrus farm. They have a number of, they raise a lot of cattle. They have a lot of oranges, citrus, other products there. It's a massive farm, generates a lot of money for the church. And they have normal ranch hands that they hire, and also other managers that they use to manage that property. And they also have some senior missionaries who actually pay for the privilege of going and working on the farm as well. So the church real estate is absolutely huge. I can't emphasize that enough. I know I didn't show you a lot of videos on it. But the church made massive real estate moves in 2024. I don't know, probably somewhere, it's hard to say because there's a lot of shadowy organizations both in the United States and across the world. I would estimate that the church probably, not including chapels, not including temples, not including new mission homes or anything like that, as far as commercial properties, I would estimate that it would be somewhere in between $1 and $2 billion last year, which is an awful lot of money to be spending on real estate. Now, that does take us to our number one news article of the week here, and that is the secret lives of Mormon wives. I'm sorry, the number one biggest news story of 2024 is the secret lives of Mormon wives. In case you don't know anything about it here, let me play the trailer for this incredibly viral show that was released all at the same time on Hulu.
I love the Mormon church, but there are a lot of rules that we have to follow. We were raised to be these housewives for the men, serving their every desire. Have kids by the time you're 21, or in my case, at 16. Well, I'm like, this.
Show me what you're working with.
Show me. I created Mom Talk. It's a group of Mormon moms making TikToks. It started with Whitney, Macy, Michaela, and I.
We're breaking a norm. We are trying to change the stigma of gender roles in the Mormon culture.
That's what scares me. In the church, we have rules for a reason.
Macy, I need you to twerk your ass off.
Show me what you're working with.
My goal was really just to be able to provide for my family.
Who is currently the breadwinner at home?
All of us.
Really?
That's right.
We blew up overnight.
2 million followers, 9 million views.
Whoa.
It's been really crazy for us.
And then it just turned into this whole group is swinging with each other.
Wait, what?
A Mormon swinging scandal has hit Utah.
No one was innocent. Everyone has hooked up with everyone.
Taylor announced that the group was involved in soft swinging.
It was like swapping in front of each other, standing next to each other.
No! Now there's a fight for Mom Talk.
You guys can't keep doing this.
The drama is now with the husbands.
The group is important to me.
Being divorced and taking care of 2 kids would be kind of tough, so you make the decision.
It feels like they're stuck in another era, and it's starting to tear the group apart.
Online, it looks like we're all the bestest of friends, but we're not. Ooh, awkward. We're the most devout out of the whole group.
And then there are others.
In what way do you feel like drinking helps you be a better mom?
Oh my gosh, what is happening right now?
There's going to be drama tonight.
There's something in the air.
911, what is your emergency? Somebody is screaming, get off me.
What's your name?
Taylor.
Taylor. At this time, you're going to be placed under arrest.
There's so many secrets. There's lies, gossip.
Sometimes fights are necessary. The gloves are off, baby.
You're hurting so bad.
I'm done. I'm out.
Can the group even survive this? There's a whole story that we literally haven't told anyone.
Now that's how you put a trailer together, folks. That was a heck of a trailer. Now there was obviously, if you're not in the know, something slightly misleading in the trailer, and that's that they showed Taylor being arrested, but it didn't happen during the filming of the show. That was several years ago. We covered that on the Mormon News Roundup. She got drunk, threw a chair at Dakota, and missed him and hit her own child. She eventually pleaded guilty and was placed on nothing but probation. So she's trying to put that behind her at this time. That The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is the single biggest show of the year. This definitely went viral, absolutely viral. It was pretty insane here. And I put together a really good breakdown of it. It was The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. If you search for it on the Mormon News Roundup, you will find my 2-hour breakdown of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, one of the longest breakdowns online, which goes into all the behind the scenes, all of the juicy gossip, all of the craziness. I think I covered it about as well as I possibly could. If you like The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I think that you will find this compilation of 2 hours of insider juicy gossip very interesting. You should really check it out. I also had the pleasure of putting together the complete anthology of Taylor Frankie Paul. So I went onto her TikToks, and I also went onto her Instagram page and downloaded every single last one of her reels. Now, Miss Paul, or is it Miss Taylor Frankie Paul, whatever, she has blessed the world with an incredible 1,100 reels. Okay. And I downloaded every single one of them, and I put them into a 9-hour back-to-back compilation so you can just watch them on loop. Okay. The only place in the world that you can find them all in one place. That was pretty insane. Let me tell you, those are, well, I actually did a reaction to that 9-hour clip, which is about a 10-minute clip. And the title of that is called, I watched 10 hours of Taylor Frankie Paul videos so that you don't have to. And believe me, you don't want to. Now, I actually haven't released that episode, but it's coming up very, very soon here. So yeah, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I will give you a sneak peek as to what my thoughts are about this particular, the most famous Mormon on the planet, Taylor Frankie Paul.
Taylor Frankie Paul is the most famous Mormon on the planet. In 2020, she single-handedly launched the viral mom talk trend, and Taylor boasts over 6 million followers on TikTok and Instagram combined. Not to mention her Secret Lives of Mormon Wives show, which is a smash hit, now renewed for a second season. Her sponsorship deals reach 6 figures. It's safe to say that her videos have been watched more than any other LDS person on the planet. Taylor Frankie Paul's popularity highlights the growing trend of influencer culture eclipsing traditional values, especially within faith-based communities. While her fame is undeniable, Taylor's content largely centers on surface-level appeal, fashion, drama, and the occasional scandal, leaving little room for meaningful discussions on faith or values. This raises questions about what we value in public figures, especially those tied to faith-based communities. And what does all this say about our society and about Mormon representation that the most well-known Latter-day Saint is a social media influencer known more for her arrest, drama, and modeling than for substance?
That is a very good question, D-Days. I am so glad that you asked. Now, I also, I've covered everything here, folks. In fact, I mean, we're coming up on 2,000 videos on this channel. 2,000. That's a lot of videos. So the most amazing thing about having 2,000 videos on YouTube is that you've got a video on almost anything Mormon related. I've got a video on it. I mean, not everything, but quite a bit. So I also just recently released a video of Taylor Frankie Paul's most watched video of all time, which just so happens to me the most watched Mormon video ever, which has over 100 million views. If you search for it on the Mormon News Roundup, you can find it. Like I said, we don't have time to cover absolutely everything. Otherwise, this episode would take way too long. But thanks so much for joining us anyway here. This series here, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, has been renewed for a second season since it was so viral. It was so important. This was the #1 most important Mormon event of the entire year. This really dominated the news cycle for about 6 weeks. It was absolutely insane how much buzz this particular show got. And I guess it's just that people want to see Mormons behaving badly. That's really, when it comes to what non-Mormons want to watch, is that they want to watch true crime. They want to watch Mormon behaving badly, and this has got a little bit of all of the above in it. So yeah, second season, I believe that they're already either in production or in development. I think they might even be shooting it already. Yeah, we're going to get a second season. Wouldn't be surprised to see even more. This could turn into kind of like a Kardashian dynasty. Wouldn't be surprised to see that. Some incredible stuff there. Now, hey, folks, we did it. The top 10 most important year in review LDS Mormon related news stories. Let's just recap them here for you. For those of you out in the live chat here, let me know, did I get this list right or did I get it wrong? Is it in the incorrect order or did I leave something off altogether? I mean, did I totally mess up? I really want to hear your feedback here. I ranked it in this way. Number 10, Fairview Temple, the relentless temple pushes, which the Fairview, Texas temple encapsulates. And then we also had the biggest Mormon movie of the year, the Heretic movie. I thought that was an important film. I gave a really great review of it, which we played during this particular episode. Most important book of the year was Second Class Saints with Dr. Matthew Harris. Number 7, I thought, was President Nelson turning 100 years old. That was a big deal. I definitely wish him the very best as far as his health is concerned. Seems to be doing okay. Number 6, I said, was the Chad Daybell lawsuit where he was found guilty and sentenced to death. Number 5, I lopped in all of the church lawsuits together, especially the Huntsman lawsuit and the Gaddy lawsuit, which are, in my opinion, the 2 most important lawsuits that the church faced this year. Maybe followed by the copycat lawsuits. That's why we covered all of those in this particular episode. Oops, that's out of order here. Number 4 is the transgender policy update. That was a big deal. It's covered a lot by slightly left-leaning media for sure. Number 3, this was huge. Temple garment updates. You could make an argument that could even be higher, but I'm kind of biased, I think, is because the real estate deals. When you drop $1 billion or $2 billion in real estate deals over the course of the year, I really think that is an absolutely big deal, and it is not covered well either by the church. The church doesn't want to talk about its real estate purchases, or it's not covered by the media either, because it is difficult to connect some of the church's subsidiaries or its different companies to the church itself. So that's why I put real estate deals. And then number 1, the secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I really thought that was the number 1 most important news story of the year. So I'm just checking those out in the live chat, see if anybody has any contradictions to, did I get this list right? Was it in the correct order? Did I leave something off? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be very grateful for that. Now, as far as plans going forward, hey folks, Mormon News Roundup, we release new content every single night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're coming up on 1 year here, by the way, where I have not missed a single day of new videos at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is pretty impressive if I don't say so myself. I also release shorts every single at noon and at midnight every single day. So you get 3 videos per day on this channel like clockwork, okay? I am as consistent as the setting of the sun. I do want to, if you are interested in supporting this podcast, I'd be very grateful for that. I don't necessarily talk about that very much, but we do have some people I would like to thank, and that's on YouTube. We have Jeffrey Banks, Garrick J, Emirac, Dave Summers, and Lee Mortensen. They are channel supporters over there on YouTube. I think they pay $5 to become a channel member. I greatly appreciate that. Thanks so much for your support. On Patreon, we have a couple of different tiers that you can support over there. It starts at $1 a month, very, very low. I want to thank those folks out there that are supporting the podcast on Patreon, specifically by name: Roy Sigert, RMW, Elizabeth, Carol, David, Blaine, Brent, Colette, Michael, and especially Sophronia, who was a founding general authority and one of the most important people behind the scenes to this podcast. That's really means a lot to me. It's not necessarily that I need the money that goes along with this, but the donations that come in are really a sign of the health of the podcast. So if you're getting donations, you're usually doing something right. If you're not getting donations, you're probably doing something wrong. But once again, everybody, thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday night. It was a pleasure to have you. Got this done in about 90 minutes, just like it did before, man. I am a professional. I really appreciate that. Always think celestial, folks. And remember, no unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.